All right, we're back with our TriMet board roundup here. We're going to skip the board member reports. They're all on different committees, and they give these reports, but they're not particularly enlightening, so we're not going to cover that. We're going to skip right to the new general manager's report. So let's go.
Report, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President.
Report 1, right?
Report 1, yes. So have a number of reports here for you today, specifically covering off the February ridership. I'd like to give you a heads up on the Southwest Corridor project. I'll bring Stu Witter up for that. I'll give you an update on HOP, our typical quarterly performance report, and I'll also give you a short overview of the general manager deliverables I have with in agreement with the board this morning, and also would like to introduce to you today our brand new executive director of maintenance at the right time. So first, in terms of ridership, in February provided just over 7.4 million rides. That's down 1.7% compared to a year ago. And I should comment, I think I passed along a Washington Post article to most of the board members indicating that not only is TriMet down, but 31 of 35 properties in the United States are down. So this is something to watch for the industry.
Yeah, that's an excuse he's giving. But what they're admitting here, and I commented on this earlier, not in a video, but on my Twitter, is that they're admitting that they're just another ho-hum transit district. By trying to say, oh, this is happening industry-wide, they're actually admitting that there's nothing special about TriMet.
And I know we're all taking steps to how do we shore that up over time, and things like HB 2017 and other initiatives are really going to help in that regard.
Doug, really quick,
sure.
So you said 31 of 35 properties?
31 of 35, correct.
Did they give an average of how far it's been down?
No, not in that article, but I do know the amount of ridership that we're down compared to many other properties a lot of them are in the 5 to 7%, some are as high as 10 to 15% range. So our softening, if you will, is to be watched. I don't think when you get to that 10-15%, I think it's more structural. There's a general banding here, but the article itself did not cover the specific averages, but have seen this from other reports. Some general similarity. So,
all right, thank you.
Okay. The system-wide weekday off-peak performance. Now these are nights and weekends, essentially flat, about 0.4% down. The weekly max ridership is down compared to last year, just off about 2.3%, and for the bus service about 1.3%. The orange line continues to be the star as it continues to grow in new ridership for us, which is terrific.
Yeah, well, stop the presses. Yeah, maybe it's good compared to last year. It still hasn't met its first year projected ridership when they proposed it. So here's a very good example of how TriMet will distort the facts to suit their agenda. They never met the target ridership, and they still haven't. And so it's not. You know, when they proposed this, they articulated so many number of people were going to use it, and it has not met that. So this is kind of a fraudulent TriMet Kelsey statement there.
That translates into about 2.8% on weekday boardings compared to this time last year. So good performance continuing there. Just had under 8,000 weekly boardings. That's about 10% fewer trips were taken on WES in February compared to the previous year. Now, WES has had more of a trending downwards.
I wonder what happened to WES. I mean, that WES is the luxury ride, and it's the bargain on top of it all. Now, we all know that it was a boondoggle that should never happen, but, you know, the money was there, and we know how the public transportation industrial complex works. If they can get the money, they're going to do. It doesn't matter what it is they do. All they want is the money. And the West is a good example. They got the money from the feds for this thing, and they wanted the money. It was another capital project that they want. You know, anything that's a capital project, they're going to do. It doesn't matter if it's realistic or not. They just want the money. And so they put in this West, and we knew at the very beginning this was going to be ridiculous because it's only a weekday rush hour service. So it's not really an option except for people that are working a 9-to-5 job. And even that, it's a very risky option. So, but it's surprising that it's losing riders. That's surprising.
Been larger in nature than the rest of the system. However, in February, this was particularly notable. We had a significant construction project going on where the ballast tracks and vegetation and a big works project, if you will, and in the railway language, they call it a work block. So that's had an impact on some of our service and reliability for the period, and you'll probably see Patrick Pricer talk to some of that in the quarterly performance coming up.
West, by the way, is still the most reliable TriMet transportation by far.
We have seen an overall drop in West ridership, though, and largely this is due to employment changes in the corridor. We are taking steps on a number of fronts, our marketing and outreach efforts. We know we've identified, for example, 31 employers along the West alignment with a total of 3,000 employees on our outreach list right now. We're actively going after those. We know there's a new pass program with PG&E, for example. There's an additional 300 employees that we'll be contacting that we think are potential targets to use the West service. We're also reaching out to major employers in the area with travel training mailers, Legacy Meridian, PCC Sylvania, and Providence St. Vincent. So you can start to see the efforts that are going on to try and shore up some of the West challenges here. Also there's 30 new multi-unit complexes that opened since West launch. So it's really trying to narrow in and target more of a targeted marketing campaign rather than just total mass mailers. Okay. That includes also new rider kits, extended social media, etc. So, and lastly, in conjunction with all the outreach, we're doing a lot of that social media and targeted messaging. We hope and are optimistic this will help shore up some of the ridership challenge we have here. The next topic is, I'm just going to ask Mr. Steve Witter if he would come join me here to give us an update on the Southwest Corridor specifically. As we continue to advance our efforts in the Southwest Corridor, now this is a Metro-led project, but TriMet is...
Yeah, so far he's pretty smooth, isn't he? He's pretty smooth, this guy, and you knew that right away that he was going to be. He's kind of the technocrat. He's very polished. Now, this Southwest Corridor, okay, they don't even have the funding, okay? They were hoping to get it on the ballot next year, but apparently they realized that it wasn't going to pass, so they pulled it. But that hasn't stopped TriMet Capital Projects from plowing huge sums of money into this, and they're going forward as if everything is just fine. So we already know how this works at TriMet. If they can't get the taxpayers to fund it, the first thing to do is try to see if they can fool the taxpayers to fund all this shit, which it works in many, many places. Because public transportation sounds so good when in the marketing presentations. If people don't understand any of the intricacies that we transit geeks understand. They just see the marketing campaigns and how can you really be against public transportation? You can't, right? So that's why it passes so easily. But here in Portland, the Portland metro area is very, very sophisticated when it comes to public transportation at this point because, it has been at the forefront of many things in that area, and so people are aware of the issues, and people stopped voting yes on TriMet referendums a while ago, basically probably because TriMet really doesn't have a particularly good reputation in the community. That's my opinion. I mean, you can read all kinds of publications that are sponsored by the industrial complex about how wonderful TriMet is, but it's not really... Well, first of all, it's not used by that many people, and second of all, there is this bullying that goes on there, and the bullying of the public, and I think that has caused some problems for their grandiose dreams of taxpayers just handing over their money. But if they don't get the money they'll find another way to get it, and that's been the pattern in the Portland area. They voted no on Milwaukee, but of course they built it anyway, and I'm sure that's what's going to happen here. They'll get the money somehow. Just like SB 217, They just took the money. They didn't even bring it to a vote for the Oregonians. Most states, at least, let try to fool the public honestly. Government is really one thing they do well is propaganda. But in Oregon, they didn't even let the voters vote because they must have known it wasn't going to go.
Deeply involved in the overall design and development of this project, and want to make you aware of some of the key decisions this board will need to make in the months ahead. So, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you to cover off the key materials.
Great. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. This is really a teaser for the Southwest Corridor. We know you had a busy agenda today, as we've seen with public testimony, and so we'd like to come back during the briefing session, hopefully next month, to give you a more in-depth presentation on Southwest Corridor. The reason I'd like to come before you today is we are at a point in the environmental review process where things are starting to get more public. We've been out with our Citizen Advisory Committee staff at City of Tigard. We're giving presentations to their city council. So we wanted to give you just a brief update on where the project was. So as you engage with your colleagues around the region, that you're sort of up to date with them. What I have before you is the project schedule. 2018 to 2027, that's quite an amount of time. So we're really in the very beginning stages of the project. As General Manager Kelsey noted, currently this environmental process is led by the Metro team. Just like we've seen in other projects, once we get a locally...
All right, well, you can't see what I can see because of the way I'm doing this video. But let me tell you here, they have the federal funding agreement for the year 2022 and the opening for 2027. Okay, so you see how they are, man? They have this all planned out. They haven't told anybody any of this. Nobody knows this except that's why we need to watch these board meetings, because this information isn't disseminated, at least not on a wide scale. I mean, you never see TRIMET people tweeting this kind of thing. I mean, I suppose it's available somewhere if you know where to look. But they have this all figured out. Nobody's been asked about this.
Preferred alternative, that work effort will really shift to TRIMET to finish up the environmental documentation in partnership with Metro.
And let's point out here that all of this planning and these environmental design review, this is millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars before they even break ground. This was the whole scam with the CRC. Remember that? $250 million was spent on that, and then it was abandoned. But it was $250 million of taxpayer money down the drain on planning, and this is the scam right here. This is the actual scam.
So right now in 2018, we have given our draft environmental impact statement to the regional FTA. Did I do that?
Way to go, Director.
Is that the electrical guy? Well, we'll have to work on your certification. Sorry about that. So anyway, we're very early in the stages. The draft environmental impact statement has gone to the FTA regional offices up in Seattle, so they do a kind of a draft review. We've done a page turn with them, and that document will become public in just a quick amount of time. That'll be released to the public in May. We're hopeful maybe a little early in April, but that would give us the 45-day comment period.
Yeah, so they've been working on this for who knows how long, probably years. And then they release the report, and then you get 45 days to comment. Yeah, the whole thing is really a scam. I hope people really understand that. You don't get any input into any of this. That's why I do these things. So because we can't change any of this, but at least you can understand that it's a scam, right? That's all I really want people to understand.
Tell the story.
Is the projector need to be rebooted?
Maybe I'll just try to get through this. So,
please.
So along with that draft environmental impact statement, the staff has recommended what is a new term for us, the initial route proposal. So in an effort to streamline the federal process, they've asked staff to essentially put out a draft preferred alternative. That enables the public to comment on a very kind of narrowed scope of the project, and then allows the locally preferred alternative to move a little bit more quickly. In May and June, we're going to be back here to ask the board of directors to extend the design contracts so that we can, as we narrow down the LPA.
See, this is what I was just saying. Okay, so they're already spending millions, and they're going to want to spend millions more. That's where this is where your tax money goes. Okay, it's carefully hidden from the public, but huge amounts of money. I mean, they'll always, the money is all opera. It's not true, man. Millions and millions get sent into planning and bureaucratic functions.
And move beyond that, we'll advance the design to 30%. That'll allow us to make application to the federal government. In July, the steering committee, which General Manager Kelsey sits on along with other regional partners, will choose a locally preferred alternative. Okay.
Yeah, see, now there you go. So there you have Kelsey, and all of the other technocrats or politicians will make all the decisions about this. No surprise, that's how it works.
I'm back in the game. So there are the dates that we talked about. We'll be back at TRIMET to have the board adopt the locally preferred alternative. At that point, local jurisdictions often put conditions on the LPA. That'll be an opportunity for you to examine that as well. And then the locally preferred alternative process really wraps up in October with Metro Council adoption. I wanted to, again, touch on the initial route proposal. I mentioned FTA is requiring this as part of a streamlined project developed by staff, and it's been shared with the public. So Citizens Advisory Committee has seen it, Steering Committee has seen it, and as well as some of the jurisdictions. Really quickly, this is the initial route proposal. Of the many routes that we chose, this is referred to as the through route. It allows us to reach the heart of Tigard. Doesn't quite get into that historic downtown, but it's right there on the edge at Hull Boulevard. We use a railroad alignment, so we've been able to minimize some impacts to some pretty significant businesses there, and then eventually end at the Bridgeport Village. So just wanted to take a quick moment to brief you. I know there's a document in your packet that gives a little bit more detail, and then we'd look forward to coming back for a more detailed briefing and conversation with you hopefully next month. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I guess I just want to say
Lovely.
thank you for working with the property owners and businesses along Sequoia. They were very cordial and worked with us well, but I know it was a lot of effort to get to where you are. So.
Well, Leah Robbins and Dave Unsworth, who are leading our design effort, have done a great job to sort of tweak that route, and so it feels good. I think everybody's supportive. Yeah.
I would just maybe add to this, Steve, to compliment the team, and just having worked in other properties before with large capital projects like this, that the team...
Here comes the mutual masturbation session where they all suck each other's dicks. I'm sorry if that's crude, but this is that's what it is.
A great job. They really are world class in how they approach things and the results they get. So just really well done to Steve and Leah and Dave. So thank you. Next part of the update is actually a HOP update. You have in your packages the latest update on our implementation of the HOP electronic fare system. We're moving forward now on the next milestone in this transition. We've begun testing to convert our ticket vending machines, we call them TVMs, from basically printing the paper to printing the HOP limited use tickets. The conversion itself will take place over the next several months. The key change to the TVMs is the simplification of the purchasing process for the visitors and infrequent users who use these ticket vending machines. With the simplifications, the customers, as a reminder, will be able to purchase 2.5-hour and day tickets at TVMs after the TVM's been converted. So there's a whole conversion process you will see unfold here in this network. The TVMs, though, will also no longer sell 7, 14, and 30-day passes. This is part of the overall transition of the whole program, and we eventually will phase those all out throughout the whole system overall. In terms of numbers, though, these passes, 7, 14, 30-day passes, they account for about 2% of all the ticket vending machine transactions. So it's something, every percentage counts, but it's not of a large enough percentage that it's going to distract us from our implementation overall program. But these adjustments, as just to remind the board, are part of a much larger plan that you approved as we developed HOPT many months and literally years ago to simplify things in the transactions for our riders and improve the customer experience. So as an example, and I'll just give you a few that the board had made decisions on. You eliminated the zones, eliminated the free rail zone, you brought youth and honored citizens to the same price, you adopted fare capping, which is referenced earlier this morning. The same applies to the calendar month, in that once a person rides enough and has spent the equivalent of a month pass, the rest of the rides for that calendar month are free. You also embrace the efforts to grow the retail network, access points to getting access to the cards and thus our system. Currently, we're at 360 and growing, so we're well on our way now. As we looked at the simplification of our fare system and the elimination of the 7, 14, and 30-day passes, we conducted a Title VI analysis to look at potential impacts to the vulnerable communities.
Oh boy.
Even though we're not removing the passes system-wide at this time, we did proactively want to identify potential concerns that might be related to these ticket vending machines. So what we have found in this, and I'll bring up Carl Green, who's our Title VI and Equity Programs Administrator, to cover off some of the details now with you. So Carl, if you could join me, that'd be terrific. But the findings overall show no disparate income impact of removing the 7, 14, and 30-day passes from the TVMs or from TriMet as a whole. So maybe with that, Carl, I'll turn this short presentation over to you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Doug. President Warner, members of the board, I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to present on the Title VI equity analysis for the proposed elimination of the 30-day pass to to set the stage for the proposed elimination of the 30-day pass proposal briefing.
30-day pass.
I wanted to make note of the e-fare migration Title VI analysis that was completed on January 6, 2016.
Wait a minute.
Part of this technical analysis.
They're eliminating the 30-day pass completely? I don't know about that one, man. What does Opal think about that?
This included the elimination of the 7 and 14-day pass options. And as a result of that analysis, there was no disparate impact or disproportionate burden on low-income populations or minorities.
Yeah, I'm sure you can believe that.
Providing this information is relevant since all multi-day pass options will be eventually phased out along with the 30-day pass, as Doug mentioned. And currently, multi-day passes are currently only sold at ticket vending machines and the mobile ticketing application. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide here that you have before you provides a visual depiction of the decision-making process as well as the actions taken when performing an equity analysis for either fare or major service changes. The FTA requires that all fare changes be evaluated for possible impacts on minority and low-income populations. If none are found, then no further action is required. However, if negative impacts are found for either minority or low-income populations, TRIMET will evaluate alternatives or equitable alternatives that serve the same objective. And if there is no alternatives that will provide equitable measures.
Let me stop this. This guy here, can you see him? I don't know if you can see it. This is a brand new job that they as TriMet keeps blowing up its bureaucracy as high as they can. This guy has his own he's another employee in that office besides the director of whatever they call it, diversity. So they have 2 people in there now, and I guess he's just doing these things. I guess I don't know. This is just bureaucracy, you know. It's just mindless bureaucracy here.
Then TRIMET will look to avoid, minimize, or mitigate the proposed action. So as far as the Title VI methodology, this proposal includes the eventual elimination of the 30-day pass, and an ordinance to do so will be brought forward to the board at a later date. The premise for conducting this analysis ahead of the ordinance reading is to identify any potential impacts that may be pertinent to a more immediate TVM transition strategy that is scheduled to start later this spring. One of the main questions that drove this research was, does eliminating the 30-day pass create any potential impacts? The data source that I utilized for this analysis was the 2016 TRIMET Fair Survey. Before getting into testing disparate impacts, it is worthwhile to first define minority, which is all persons who identify as being part of any racial or ethnic group besides white, non-Hispanic. The disparate impact analysis examined whether trips by minority riders may bear a greater share of negative impacts or experience a lesser share of the positive impacts than trips by non-minority riders. This table here provides a comparison of minority status for the 30-day pass purchases by location, i.e. ticket vending machines and the mobile ticketing application. Column 1 denotes the number of non-minority fares purchased for TVMs and the mobile ticketing application, and column 2 represents minority fares purchased at the same channels of sales. To verbalize the findings, the purchase rates are similar for both groups. The results indicate that there is no disparate impact for the minority population. And the impacts are equally borne.
Yeah, whatever you say.
Similar to the previous slide, it is also important to define low income with respect to Title VI. That is, individuals who are at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. The disproportionate burden analysis examines whether trips by low-income riders may bear a greater share of negative impacts or experience a lesser share of the positive impacts than trips by higher income populations or income riders. And as this table shows here, it's a comparison of income status for the 30-day pass purchases by location. And similar to the disparate impact, there are similar results, which indicates that both higher income and low income fares purchased are purchased at similar rates, thus no potential disproportionate burden are found, and the impacts are equally borne. All right, so the analysis conclusion states that given the available data, TRIMET finds no disparate impact or disproportionate burden with this proposal. Going above and beyond the Title VI requirements, TRIMET evaluated the fare sales reports to further assess any potential impacts with the pass elimination. Since the advent of HOP in July 2017, the overall demand for 30-day passes by TRIMET's ridership have been extremely low. The minimal use of the 30-day pass is correlated with the positive attributes inherent in the HOP fare system. So 30-day passes account for less than 1% of all transactions from TVMs in the mobile ticketing app between July 18th, 2017 and December 31st of 2017.
That's interesting. Well,
as expected, the 30-day pass sales at TVMs have
nobody really bought passes at the TVMs because the TVMs are. I used to see them ripping off riders. You know, those were sold at supermarkets, so it's not surprising that nobody would use that for the 30-day.
Declined over 33% in just the first 6 months of HOP. So, in that same time period, HOP sales have also increased substantially, and the number of active cards increased from 8,100 to over 54,000. This signifies not only the ridership's adoption of HOP, but the realized benefits of the system's pay-as-you-go and fare capping features. And I'll also add to that last bullet point, I received the KPI, or key performance indicator, for the fare sales of February 2018, and the number of active cards are now at 81,000 active cards. All right, so mitigations and next steps.
TVM outreach.
Although no adverse impacts were found, TRIMET will implement several mitigations to minimize some of the potential impact. The first is a TVM transition outreach plan to keep riders well informed of the upcoming changes.
Yeah, right.
The second is a TVM conversion strategy, which will preserve TVMs in higher and low-income areas until later or latter part of the project.
Yeah.
So as far as next steps goes, an ordinance will be brought forward to the board at a later date to phase out the 30-day pass and all multi-day options. So this analysis is being brought forward in order for the board to approve and consider the Title VI analysis.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions by the board, comments by the board? Yes.
Thank you, Carl, for all of that great information. I've got a couple questions in regards to kind of not necessarily the analysis, I understand that perspective, but it's really, I mean, as we start projects like this, I mean, when it has intended and unintended consequences and impacts. You know, as we think about kind of the information that you just gave us, in contrast to, you know, these numbers don't necessarily highlight the adoption per se, you know, by the different type of riders, you know, the transit dependent, the low income, the minority. So we're looking at a pretty large swath of information and data that tells us, as you just said, I believe right now we're somewhere about 81,000
Yes.
active cards, which would represent roughly just less than a third of our daily ridership, if I'm not mistaken. Daily ridership is somewhere around 300,000 plus or minus 1,000 or 10,000 here or there, but it represents roughly about a third of our daily riders. Although, again, the whether or not it's got a disparate impact is really.
He's saying 300,000 people a day ride TRIMET. 300,000 individuals. That does not compute to the ridership statistics. Just so you know, I mean, the metro population is 1.5 million there, and 300,000 would be 1/5 of that, right? Yeah, I don't know, unless I got my figures. So that would be 20% ridership. Well, the facts are like 12% of the public uses TRIMET, so sounds like he's half off to me.
Really going to depend on how well the distribution of the cards are across all of our ridership. Is that a correct statement or an incorrect statement?
I would like to reach out to. Sorry about that. I can't necessarily answer that question, but I would defer to either Ryan Shaw.
Maybe I can jump in to help a bit here. So I think if the 81,000, that's card distribution, that's not necessarily daily use. So
Correct.
So I think if we look at the 300,000 boardings a day,
Okay.
so we're taking a
All right,
slow.
it's 300,000 boardings. That's 150,000 people at the most if they just took one mode of transit. Yeah, I knew that was wrong. I knew that. It's boardings, it's not people.
Burn into this. And so you're quite right. We need to get a very wide distribution of this, not to just our existing ridership, but also future ridership as well. So this is part of our ongoing marketing efforts, and I think actually a best practices of implementation of complex software programs just like this. They're usually very challenging. So we have a lot of work to do to get, I call the wide net out beyond just existing ridership. It's going to take probably typically about a year plus, I think, to really get this full this full coverage out there for us. We think also one of the benefits are going to be having these extra retail outlets out there. So removing the barriers to access and entry is going to be one of the key tools for us. And then also having ability to get tickets through the airport and others for our tourists and others are going to be other new ways to manage this relationship. So we're not there yet. So I think the 81,000 to 300,000 I think is probably overstated in actual use. So I still believe we're
okay,
at
well,
very
at least
early
he cleared
stages
that up. All right.
of the implementation of this overall program. A lot more to do.
So, this is going to be more of a statement than it is a question, but ultimately, the analysis that whether or not we have a disparate impact, I think it's correct. I mean, I think we don't, from a perspective of taking all the information and saying whether or not in accordance with who and when 30.
Their analysis, they don't really take into consideration the emotional effects that these changes do to people. They really, that's never part of their equation, is the emotional consequences of changing things for people that have been used to doing it one way and now they're going to have to do it another way. And that's never part of these discussions. Of course not. I'm not a big hop. I thought it was another useless capital project, but all the countries going this way. It's part of the security state. It's a tracking system. It makes it easier to track people. It does have a fare capping, which is certainly a good thing. And I don't know, TriMet the reliability of their fare things has not been very good.
Day passes and 14-day passes and 7-day passes were purchased. There's not a disparate impact. My concern, though, goes to ensuring that we stay on top of the ongoing analysis as we move forward.
All right, well, this is going to go on and on and on, and it's enough for today. I can't take any more. And you can see why it's so difficult to watch these board meetings, because they just go on and on and on. It's just dry, boring information, but we need to know what's going on. And the only way to do that is to sit through these board meetings.